Welcome back, friends. Last guy here. Time for us to do a vlog. So this vlog is the water regulations vlog. So on the 15th, that's in 11 days, I take the T5 test. This is the most important test you can take in California when it comes to water, because this is the people at the top. The test is taken in interview formats, 3 dudes at a table, asking you questions, and you got to answer them. You got 30 minutes. They're going to ask 6 questions. They're all going to be related to regulations or just understanding a situation, things like that. They'll ask personnel questions, regulations, things like that. Because you're supposed to be the guy in control of the entire water system. You're the guy at the top. So I need to know everything. I have a T4. I'm doing a T3 level job. T4 is supervisor. So T3 is the guys who run the water plant. Supervisors, the T4, are the guys who manage the people who run the water plant. And they're buying the chemicals, they're buying supplies, they're making sure the plant's running. Then you have the senior supervisor. That is the guy at the top whose entire job is to make sure that plant runs. So he's making sure his supervisor is doing their job correctly. And then when something goes wrong, he's the one who's got to figure it all out. If something happens to some, let's say like a pump breaks and chemicals spilling everywhere. Well, now you've got a chemical spill situation. And so it's his job to instruct his people what to do. And it's like telling a guy, okay, you are gonna, if you can safely do it, turn off the pump. If you can safely do it, safely do it, turn off the pump. And then it's like, okay, there's a form for this. You need to fill out the form, figure out how much got spilled, how bad a damage is it, and things like that. Did it get out of secondary containment? And can we still run the plant? So ordering people to gather information to see if we can still run the plant despite what happened here. And then, so I'm just telling all these people to do what to do, and then they give me information. And then with that information, I keep making decisions and telling them what to do. And eventually, once everything's handled, I contact certain people depending on what happened. So if some chemical spills, there's certain people I have to call. If a lot of chemical spills, there's more people I need to call, because there's like environmental and the state, they need to know something leaked. But then I had to tell them if it's contained or not. Obviously, if it's not contained, try to contain it first. If you can't contain it, then you're like, look, I can't contain it. We have to figure out how to contain it. Like, you can't go like, yeah, I haven't figured out how to contain it. No, you got to figure out how to contain it. That would be like, say, there's these giant containers of chemical. They're like many feet tall. Let's say one of them gets hit and chemicals just spilling out. So if that's happening, then you're getting like the anti-flood stuff, and you're putting down like sandbags, whatever, to hold all that chemical into an area, and you want to make sure it doesn't get into dirt or anything. You just need to make sure you hold it back and try to make it go downhill into containment of some kind. Or even have containers, which there are containers on hand, where you're having it spill into these containers. The thing is all these chemicals are meant to have secondary containment around them, which is where if it spills, there's like a cage, or not a cage, but there's an area around it where it all spills into there, and it's fine. That's if it's spilling from the bottom. If something like hits it from the top, that's just spilling out, like, okay, then you got to find a way to handle that without getting hit in the splash zone kind of thing. And you get containment. You have to contain it. You have to figure out how to contain it. There's no, I don't know how to contain it now that I think about it. You got to figure out how to contain it. Once it's contained, you make all the calls you need to make. You're calling the state, you're calling all these people like, here's what happened, here's the situation, here's how we handled it, letting you know because you need to be told, because that's the protocol. And now I'm going to call the hazmat people to clean all this up. And then they're going to clean it up. And then we're going to need to get a crew in here to wash down the area, because it's now got chemical in it of some kind. And then we need to replace the tank that got popped, or the machine that got popped, things like that. And the question is, can the plant still run despite this happening? And if it's a chemical container, probably not, unless you have 2 of them, and things like that. Usually, a plant tries to have more than one of everything, so you have a backup, so that even if something fails, switch to the other one and you're good. There are points of failure that can still mess you up, like, say, an earthquake happens, bursts a pipe between where your chemicals feeding to your pumps. That pipe gets popped, there's nothing you can do. That's the only way, so you got to shut down the plant, clean out that area, like try to shut down Try to, yeah, shut down where the chemical is coming from so it's not going to that pipe anymore. Clean out the area, replace the pipe, and then you're back to doing your job. Normally what you would probably do is you would probably, I think to keep the plant running, you would get a container, try to pour some chemical into that container, take that container down to the pump, and then you're feeding from that container into the pump to do your job. And you would just have to keep doing that to keep the plant running until that pipe gets replaced. Because the pipe's likely in concrete and stuff, so it would take some work to do. You got to keep the plant running. And you would report to the plant, to the state that, like, this is what's happening, these are the things going on, and then you would do all that stuff. So that's the job I'm going for, is the guy who, if anything goes wrong, it's his head. So the guy who should have gone to jail over Flint, Michigan, that guy, that would be the job I'm going for with the T5. I've explained a lot here. So what I'm going to do here is, you need to know regulations, you need to know how to handle things. I'm going to tell you all the regulations because this is practice for me, but also I think it's interesting to learn all this stuff as well. So this is also practice, but I was telling you. So the first thing to know is, well, there's the Safe Drinking Water Act, which I forget when that was written, but that's the whole thing that got this all going. We're like, we need to make all the water good. And the most important rule, the first rule that everyone needs to know is the surface water treatment rule. And the purpose of this rule is to protect the public. So the first one was written in 1989. So 1989, this rule was written, and the point was to protect the public from microbial contaminants in surface water. And specifically, they were focused on Giardian virus. Those were the first ones that were specifically focused on. And at the time, you needed to remove 3 log of Giardia, which is 99.9% of Giardia in the water, and 4 log, which is 99.99% of virus in the water. You remove it and you inactivate it. Removals through coagulation, flocculation, sedimentation, and filtration, and then inactivation is through disinfection, which is usually chlorine or some primary disinfectant. And this applies to all public water systems, all of them. Any water system that is using surface water, which is like lakes and reservoirs and like dams, those are reservoirs, and using groundwater under direct influence of surface water. So if there's a groundwater source that is getting fed by a lake, that also counts as a surface water. So that's what this regulation is on, is all of that. Every single plant in America that uses surface water and groundwater under direct influence of surface water uses this rule, the surface water treatment rule. And so it's like you get rid of 3 log Giardia, 4 log virus, also residuals. So to ensure that the water is protected, at least 0.2 ppm, which is milligrams per liter, of chlorine residual has to be in the water leaving the plant and has to be detectable in the distribution system. That way the water is always protected, because if there's chlorine always in the water, it's a very little amount, by the way, is always in the water, then it's always preventing things from growing in the water so that you don't drink any of these growths. And then the last rule they put in the original surface water treatment rule was NTU. So combined filter effluent coming out of your all your filters together was a maximum of 5 NTU, and you needed to be under 0.5 NTU 95% of the time, and your turbidity is being monitored and recorded every 4 hours. If you go over that, then you're reporting to the state, hey, we went over on this, so that they know that, and then that's an issue, because then the water is dirty, and if the water is dirty, then who knows what's in there, kind of thing. NTUs are turbidity. This is just how cloudy is the water. Most water you see is like under 0.1. That's why it's so clear. And it's just, this is not what I would say in the interview, but just letting you know. So NTU is just, it stands for something plate, it's like nephelit plate, whatever. And it's just how clear is the water. That's all it really is. They used to use plates to figure out how clear the water is, because when you can't see the plate anymore and underwater, that's how dirty the water is, kind of thing. So that was the first rule. Also, there's the rule of, in that rule is just you have to report your turbidities, that 4 hour thing, you have to report that every month by the 10th of the next month. Those were everything in the first surface water treatment rule. Then in 1998, they added more. It became the interim enhanced surface water treatment rule, and it's the same thing. The purpose is to protect the public from microbial contaminants, Specifically, we're looking at crypto, giardia, and virus. So the key thing was crypto got added. Cryptosporidium, there was the Milwaukee incident where people were drinking the water and they got stomach issues and a lot of people got sick. I believe some people died. And this happened in Milwaukee. And so they found was, oh, there's crypto. We should worry about that too. Crypto got the goal, crypto has to be removed by 2-log, and it's by removal. You can't inactivate it. It's like little eggs. So it had to be physically removed, which is in the filtration. And the goal is to have no crypto at all. No crypto. Because crypto are like little creatures. It's like the whole, like, I won't say this in an interview, but again, it's like the whole cockroach eggs can't be destroyed by anything. It's the same thing with crypto. Their eggs can't be destroyed by anything. You have to just take them out through filtration. So you got to take 99% of them through filtration. That's how it works. That's 2-log. Another thing that got added to this is, so for interim enhanced, this applied to all systems with populations of 10,000 and up. And that'll get covered later. But right now, it's only population 10,000 and up were covered where they were worried about crypto. They also added that sanitary surveys needed to be taken, which are done every 3 or 5 years, depending on your system. They also added that finished water reservoirs needed to have covers, which I'm surprised to learn that they didn't have covers until this regulation. Because the water is done. You don't want to let anything touch that water, but they didn't have covers yet. It's crazy. So ducks could swim in finished water back in the day before 1998. And they also added that you needed to have a different disinfection profile and benchmark. And what this was is just seeing how well disinfection's working through the system, and it's just a way to know just how well your stuff's working so that you just know what it is and how well it's doing, so you have a standard that you can stick to. So disinfection profiling and benchmarking. When it came to, so you still had 0.2 disinfection residual, and you still had need to be detectable in distribution, and giardia and virus were the same still. What changed was the NTU. So turbidity, it went from a 5 to a 1, because 5 is actually pretty dirty. 1 is still dirty, but not as dirty. So maximum 1 leaving the plant, maximum 1 combined filter effluent, and under 0.3 turbidity 95% of the time. And this is still being recorded every 4 hours, and like you're doing a lab every 4 hours, checking the turbidity and you're recording it. But they also added individual filter effluent regulations as well, where you have to monitor what an individual filter is doing every 15 minutes. So you could be doing really well with everything combined, but there could be a problem child. So they added more things where exceeding turbidities with problem children, the singles had regulations on them. And they made 4 regs on that, where if a single filter was over 0.5 to 50 minutes in a row readings, then you had to do a profile on it. Well, this is after a backwash. Backwash is when you clean your filters. After 4 hours after backwashing filter, if it's still dirty, then you need to do a profile on it and give it to the state do it within 7 days and then give it to the state by the 10th of the next month. And then that's only after backwashing, because then something's going wrong with your backwashing. It's not doing a good job. Now, if an individual filter does this 2 times in a row over 1, then same thing, profile within 7 days, which is getting the turbidity, which filter is it, the date and all that, send to the state by the 10th of the next month. But if the same filter is going over a 1 3 months in a row, like going over a 1 twice, 3 months in a row, that's an issue. And then that requires a filter assessment, which I need to double check what that is. My understanding is it's a just more thorough look into the filter, trying to figure out what the heck's going on with this dang filter. And that's done within 14 days. And that's submitted by the 10th of next month. And then lastly, if a single filter is going over a 2, over a friggin' 2 months in a row, and it's the same filter, then you have to do a comprehensive profile evaluation, which I need to figure out what the heck that is. And that has to be done within 30 days and submitted within 90 days. So I told you all that regulation for interim enhanced. Interim enhanced, so 4 years later, 2002, came LT1, which is long-term 1 long-term 1 surface water treatment rule, which was basically the only difference between an interim and this is it was for the rest of the population. So for 9,999 population and below, they now had this reg on them too. But it was a little less stringent in that if you had to do a comprehensive profile evaluation, you had 60 days to do it and 120 days to submit it. That was the only difference between the two of them. So you had all the same regs. So it just took them 4 years to go like, okay, the smaller systems need to catch up now. That's basically what it was. Then in 2006 came LT2, which is long-term 2, surface water treatment rule. And the purpose of this one was to focus more. So it's, again, protecting the public from microbial contaminants, specifically crypto, giardia, and virus, but putting more emphasis on source water monitoring and on crypto. So in this way, it goes by, depending on your population, is how often you should be testing for your source water for crypto, E. coli, and turbidity. The biggest systems, which would be like San Diego, are testing once a month for 2 years. Because you monitor all this time, and based on 2 years of monitoring, you fall into one of 4 bins. So bins are what they call so the bins are, after you do all your monitoring, it's based on how many oocytes of crypto is in your water. And also potentially from the turbidity and the E. coli, if there is in your source water, they'll want you to deal with that too. But if you have 0.075 oocytes per liter and below, you don't have to do anything. That's not much. But if you go higher, where you're hitting above that up to a 1, like just below a 1, so 0.99, then you have to do a 2 log, you have to do a 1.5 log removal. No, maybe it's a 1, no, you have to do a 1 log removal if you're a conventional treatment plant, and direct filtration plants have to do a 1.5. After that, it's between a 1 and 2.99, and that is 2 log removal for conventional and 2.5 removal for direct filtration. And then if you have over 3 oocytes, so if your water has a lot of crypto in it, then you have to do an additional removal of 2.5 log or 3 if you're direct filtration. The reason why direct filtration has to do more is because they don't have sedimentation basins. They specifically are just filtering stuff out. And so you just got to get more of those oocytes out. So if you have water that has just a lot of crypto in it, you're just like, I think you need to just just kill the crypto in the source water, really. And that leads to the microbial toolbox. The microbial toolbox is something EPA came up with, just a bunch of ways to add more log removal to deal with crypto. And examples are, I got to learn this part better. So examples are like managing your watershed. So in this case, the example that's always given is, if there's a cow nearby your water source and he's pooping into the lake, you get rid of that cow. Or you fence off the lake so the cow can't get to the lake. You're just removing that source because that cow is a source of fecal in the source water. Just think about source water, like lakes and stuff like that are getting used as a source of water. We clean it all up. Animals get in that stuff. Animals do things in that water. So it'd be like removing the animal presence is a way to get at least 0.5 credit. And there's just extra treatment like enhanced coagulation, like coagulating at a higher degree to get more stuff out. There's some other filter things you can do, just there's more filter stuff you can do to get the credit up as well. There's things like that. So that is all the surface water treatment rule. So as you can see, from 1989 all the way to 2006, they just kept improving the rule to protect the public. So that's what that one was. Around this time came the next regulation. It's disinfection byproduct rule. So really, the shorthand for it in my head is like, this is just to make sure we're not overzealous. The purpose of and there's 2 stages, disinfection byproduct rule, stage 1, stage 2. And I forget the years on them right now. Stage 2 was 2006, I believe. I think stage 1 was 1989. It was 1998. And the purpose of the stage 1 was to protect the public from disinfection byproducts from our disinfectants and the residuals of our disinfectants. So we don't do too much to protect the public, because consuming too much disinfectant can be hazardous to health, and consuming too much disinfection byproduct can be hazardous to health as well in a chronic way. So it can be dangerous to health. Like, it can cause cancers, it can cause just cramping, just a lot of situations, or even mess with your reproductive organs. What they found in animal testing was some of this stuff, if you drink too much of it, would cause reproductive issues and bladder cancer. So we try not to go too far. So the main disinfectants and their disinfectant byproducts, and also just removing precursors so you don't have as much disinfectant byproducts. So chlorines and chloramines are a primary disinfectant, and the maximum you can have of them is a 4 entering distribution, which is a good amount. So the reason why we have so much is because it's to have a residual to protect the water. It's killing anything in the water. It's keeping the water from getting infected. That's what it's doing. That's why you have such a high residual. And over time, the bigger system, you want a high number, but not up to 4, because it's got to go miles away, and it's got to be able to protect the water miles away. And the further you go, the less that residual is going to be. That's why residuals can go so high, but they can't go higher than 4. So chlorines and chloramines, chlorine is usually just meant, primary disinfectant is just killing everything. Chloramines is how you keep a residual, because it's a weaker chlorine, but it's still a chlorine, but it lasts longer. And so 4 is the max on that. Milligrams per liter, that's a ppm. And its disinfection byproduct is total trihalomethanes and haloacetic acids. So trihalomethanes, THMs, has an MCL maximum contaminant level of 0.08, while haloacetic acids has a maximum contaminant level of 0.06. And so you just don't go beyond those points in the distribution system. Then you have ozone, which is a primary disinfectant, but ozone has no residual. Instead, the residual used for ozone is chloramines. But it's used as a primary disinfectant, kills everything. But it does have a byproduct, that is bromate. Ozone turns bromide into bromate. And bromate is very dangerous to drink, it's not good for you. And so the maximum MCL for bromate is 0.01 ppm. Lastly is chlorine dioxide. Chlorine dioxide is what my plant uses. The other 2 plants in San Diego use ozone. So my plant uses chlorine dioxide. It's very effective at killing everything, and the maximum contaminant level, the maximum residual is a 0.8 ppm. And chlorite, the disinfectant byproduct, the maximum contaminant level for that is a 1. So that's most of the real. After that, you have reducing disinfection byproduct precursors, which is based on total organic carbon in the water. So what happens is the source water is tested for total organic carbon and for alkalinity. And then the finished water is tested for total organic carbon. And so if you've done a good job, you'll have an amount you need to remove. If you have a lot of total organic carbon, up to a certain amount, and low alkalinity, you need to remove at least 50% of the total organic carbon from your source water. You have to remove a bunch, but if you have high alkalinity and low total organic carbon, you have to remove only 15%. It just depends on how much total organic carbon is in your water when it's tested. Because the more total organic carbon there is, the more disinfectant byproducts you can have. So you want to reduce that. And to make sure everything's in compliance, THMs and HA5s are tested using a running annual average, as they're tested quarterly. And bromate and source water is tested monthly. Chlorite is tested daily, and chlorine dioxide and chloride is tested daily. And chlorine and chloramines are tested monthly with total coliform rule testing as well. And that'll total coliform rule testing as well. And that's going to be the next rule I tell you about in a minute. That's all tested together. And that's all of that. So then stage 2 comes in. So stage 2 is, again, protecting the public from disinfectants and disinfection byproducts, where we have an MRDL for disinfectants and we have a MCL for the byproducts. But its main focus is on THMs and HA5s. That's what it's focused on. So it changed the rule where it went from running annual average to locational running annual average. So if your THMs were great with the entire system, you were good. But if there was a problem spot where THMs were high or HA5s were high, they were ignored because the entire system was doing well. So locational comes in and says, okay, we need to care about every spot. We can't just have some people having bad water, which, that makes perfect sense. That's a good thing. So it changed THM compliance from running annual average to locational running annual average, which is good. Also, running annual average was used for, I believe, bromate. To double check that. Yeah, double check that in my notes. And then they added the initial distribution system evaluation. The idea here was test for THMs and HA5s at more locations. Just increase how many places we're testing it for so that we can reevaluate and see how we're doing on this, and then see if we need to change our sites to be more representative of THMs and HA5s. That's what that did, and that's happened in 2006. Now, some systems didn't have to do that. If there was the system-specific survey where if a system had a lot of data on THMs and HA5s from their system, and they understood how to do water models, then they could just select the sites themselves and not have to do the IDSE. That was one way around it. Another one was if a system had a lot of data on THMs and HA5s, and under a specific period of time, if they were under 0.04, this is called the 40-30 rule, they're under 0.04 THM ppm and 0.03 HA5s ppm. If they were under that, then they could not do the IDSE because they're already doing fine. They're already having good representation. And then there was a small system waiver where if you had a population of 500 and below and what had good data was basically 40-30 rule, then you could waive doing the IDSE. Because the reason to waive the IDSE is just to save time and money is the best way to put it, which I don't know if I'm going to say that at the interview, but that's the best way to put it, is like, so they don't have to do this whole survey. Just skipping it, because like, we're already doing fine, we don't need to do this, we're already doing good, we're already representative. And that's stage 2. Total co-form rules, that's what I need to go over. Let's see here. So there's not a lot of time. So I'm going to quickly go over 2 regulations before I go over total co-form rule. So there's the groundwater rule. Groundwater rule is basically just, the point of this rule is, the purpose is protect the public from groundwater that is being used in systems that use groundwater without treating it, or use groundwater, or even surface water systems that are using groundwater without treating it. Because groundwater is trusted. The entire point of a plant is to mimic how the earth makes groundwater. Because the idea is water's just going through the earth and going through so many stages of dirt and everything that's getting filtered into good water. That's why well water is usually safe. But the idea here is well water isn't always safe. There's chances of well water getting contaminated. So this rule is in place to monitor well water, to monitor groundwater that's being used in distribution systems, and just testing them. And testing for fecal and other things. And I don't remember the exact, so I got to get better on this rule. But if it's found deficient, then the system has to get in there and fix the deficiencies and do 4-log removal and inactivation by approved means by the state before it gets to the first customer. So it has to do some treatment of this water if it's found to not be as sanitary as it should be. And really, I think this is really fears of, say, like septic contamination, like people have septic tanks that leaks into the ground and things like that, or just any pollution leaking into the ground and getting into the water. That's really what the fear is here. I forget the year of this rule, so I need to look that up and memorize that. Another rule is the lead and copper rule. So the lead and copper rule, I don't remember when it was written, so I got to learn that again. But more recently, in a year, I can't remember either, lead and copper got more serious after Flint, Michigan. So the lead and copper rule was, you don't want your water to have there's action levels on lead and copper because people don't want to drink lead and copper. You drink lead, it damages your brain, damages your kidneys, and damages your red blood cells. Copper messes with your stomach, your intestines, your liver, and your kidneys. So you don't want to drink either of those. The thing is, a lot of plumbing has lead and copper in it. So we're worried about that and that. Well, we need to make sure our when water comes out of the plant, it's scale forming, so it protects the pipe so it doesn't leach into the water when you drink it. That's the whole idea. The lead and copper rule is we have action level. We're protecting the public from lead and copper because it can do some damage to people in these specific ways I already said. And want to educate the public about it, and we want to have action levels so that we replace linings whenever they're bad. So the way monitoring works is it's usually in old systems or places where there's a lot of lead pipes that we're worried about, high-risk lead pipes. So you go to these houses and you do the first draw after at least 6 hours from like the sink at cold tap, not hot tap, because hot's using the water boiler. So you do cold tap. So you're drawing water, cold water, after 6 hours idle. So it's usually in the morning before anyone's touched it. And you're drawing that sample, and you're testing it for 7 things. You're testing it for pH, temperature, calcium, corrosivity, orthophosphate inhibitors, silica, and I'm missing one. I said pH. Oh, good. I'm missing one. And of course, you're also testing for lead and copper. But you're also testing for all those other things besides lead and copper. And also, it has to be maximum 12. You can't go beyond 12 because then it's just standing water. You do 2 sites per site. You do 2 samples per site. And this is done every 6 months. You can do less if the house or wherever is proven to be doing well. Then you can do it annually, biannually, triannually, or every 9 years. And if it hits an action level, so lead's action level is 0.015 ppm, and copper's action level is 1.3 ppm. If you hit these action levels, then what the system has to do is educate the public. We tell the public, hey, you've got lead and copper in your lines, lead or copper in your lines. Here's what you need to know about that stuff. You're being exposed to this. Here's what you need to know about that stuff. Here's what it can do to you, so be careful with that. And then we would get to work. So if there's lead in the water, there's lead line replacements. So the customer is told 45 days ahead that we're going to replace their line. Well, what happens is they go in, find where the lead line is, and then we'll tell them in 45 days we're going to replace the line, and then the line gets replaced, and then the line's tested. The line's tested 6 months, tested, and then tested again 6 months later. And if it's good in those 2 times, then we're good. If it's still found bad, more lines get replaced. Also, when we get the results, the customer must be told through the mail within 3 days. Within 72 hours, they must be told. That's happened to that. Also, annually, we need to replace lead lines, 7% of lead lines every year. That's what the rules are. Now, that is all before the meter. If the lead stuff is inside a person's house, that's all on them. They need to replace that. We can't touch anything inside someone's home because that's not ours. We didn't make that. We made the piping before the house. Then came the revised rule, which I think was 2022, or it came into effect in 23. But it came into effect in like 21 or 22. I forget when Flint was a couple of years ago. Because of Flint. And it added that we need to do schools. We need to add schools to the rotation, not to doing this, not just homes, and childcare facilities need to be added as well. It added those things. And it also added considerations for what's representative when it comes to lead and copper. And also it added more technologies to finding lead, and so that we just are more robust in finding lead. And there's 1 or 2 more things which I can't remember right now, so I gotta work. Oh, one is a inventory. So by 2024, I believe October of 2024, every single system in America needs to have a full inventory of where their lead pipes are, so that the public knows. So you can look it up and know where the lead pipes are. That is a thing. So now you know. So there's 2 more regs I need to know really well. I need to say them quickly because I'm almost out of time. Here's the thing. This interview is only 30 minutes long, and I'm talking very much at length here because I'm being very thorough. They're not gonna maybe want to know everything I'm saying, but I need to know it all just in case they do ask. So there's public notification rule and the total coliform rule and revised total coliform rule. Let's do public notification. Public notification. The rule is to protect the public by informing them if there's something wrong with the water. That's the best way to put it. This rule was written in 1989, I believe. No, Total Coliform rule was written in 1989. I forget when this rule was written. But the entire point is to protect the public by letting them know there's something wrong with the water. And this is caused by plants not doing their job. It's caused by community water systems not running by the regulations or not testing their water. Because obviously if they're doing those things, this shouldn't happen. So there's 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. If a tier 2 happens, so a tier 2 would be an immediate threat, where if you drink the water, it will harm you. Examples of this would be E. coli, going over the MCl and chloride, going over the MCl and chlorine dioxide, and the nitrogens. Nitrite, it's a 1 ppm. Nitrate, it's a 10 ppm. Going over those things, it'd be very hazardous to drink that, because some people do drink from the sink. So it'd be very dangerous to drink those things. So that is a tier 1 violation. And like once we get that handled, we call the state, let them know tier 1 has happened. This is what happened. How do you want us to handle it? And so, okay, we tell the state within 24 hours a tier 1 has happened. So obviously, immediately you call them because the water's out there. Tier 1 has happened. Tell the state will tell us how they want us to do it. And examples of how they would want us to do it is radio, television, like right now, hey everyone, the water is dangerous. People going door to door, helicopters telling you, just every means of telling people immediately the water is dangerous, boil water order, do not touch the water. That's my alarm because I gotta get going to work, so I better finish up already. That's the first notification. So within 24 hours, we tell the state, and within 24 hours of telling the state, we must tell the people. Tier 2s are more chronic. So these are the ones where over time would give you cancer. So going over a 4 on chlorine or chloramines, going over 0.08 on THMs, or 0.06 on HA5s. Those kind of regulations. Everything that wasn't covered in Tier 1 is in Tier 2. Chronic threats instead of acute threats. Acute immediate threats. So with this one, once we know it's happened, once we handle it, we tell the state, here's what's going on, the Tier 2, and we tell them within 24 hours, and then we tell the public within 30 days that this is what's happening. And for that, it would be, they're getting in the mail, we're putting it in the newspaper, just more gradual ways of making people aware that the water isn't safe to drink because it's more like cancer causing, or it'll cause different issues. Then you have, so I said 24 hours, 30. So then you have Tier 3. Tier 3s are more clerical errors. That is when things are turned in at the wrong time. Let's say by the 10th, turbidities have to be turned in, and we turn it on the 11th. We have to tell the state as soon as we can. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, it's going to be a little late. We forgot, or things got crazy, or got deleted, and we needed time to re-get the numbers back, something like that. And you want to tell the state as soon as possible, because if you don't, they'll think you're hiding something. And then the public needs to be told within a year that these mistakes have happened. And that comes in the Consumer Confidence Report. So if you're in America, look up the CCR for your water district. And it's made every year. By the 1st of April, it's supposed to be made, and then it's supposed to be released by the 1st of July. Or June, I forget. I think I'm going to say July. And you can read through it and just see what's been in your water. What levels of things, like arsenic, there's going to be some arsenic because arsenic is natural. You'll have a little bit of arsenic in your water. You have a little bit of this or that. But it'll be so small usually you have to worry about it. But you'll still be told if that stuff's in your water. Or was in your water at one point. And so it's good to have that. And if any major things happen, it'll be in there. So if any Tier 1s or Tier 2s happen, they'll also be in the CCR. But this is where the Tier 3s will go. So it's available to the public, you know. So there's only one regulation left to tell you about. And that is the Total Coliform Rule and the revised Total Coliform Rule. And this is the one I've had arguments with others about because I've gone deep reading those. So let's see if I can summarize this as best I can. The Total Coliform Rule was written in 1989. It is in 1998 or 89. I'm going to double check that. I'm going to say 98. In 1990, Total Coliform Rule was written in 1989. And this rule is protecting the public from total coliforms, from fecal contaminants. That's what it's doing. It's protecting the public from that. You don't want to drink poop water, obviously. So it's protecting the public from that, and specifically E. coli and fecal coliforms. So we're testing for that. This would happen if a plant's not doing a good job with their residual, or if something's leaking, breaking into the pipes and leaking into distribution. Like roots getting into the pipes, or someone's water is siphoning back into the system. Things like that. So we're testing for that. And so by the frequency of how much we test is based on population. The bigger population, the more tests that are made. And the presence or absence of total coliforms used to be an acute. So with the original, total coliforms were an acute violation. But when revised kicked in, it became a treatment technique violation, whereas E. coli and fecal coliforms became an acute violation. But what total coliform was is you had to have this plan sites that are representative of your system, and you would test those quarterly. The city of San Diego tests them monthly, but you're supposed to test them quarterly, but we test them monthly because, yeah, we want to test every month. So we test it all the time. Test it monthly. No, it is monthly. Forgot I said. Test monthly, and THMs are quarterly. So you test the total coliforms monthly. And if you take more than 40 samples per month, and you have more than 5% are positive total coliforms, that's a violation. And if you take less than 40 samples and you have more than one positive total coliform, that's a violation. And also, when you get these total coliform positives, you have to do a repeat sampling, which is 3 samples. You take it at the site, 5 connections up and 5 connections down, so you can see the breadth of it. And you're testing all these samples for E. coli and fecal coliforms. Revised kicked in July 1st of 2021. In July 1st, it used to be if you had more than 5% or more than 1, depending on your sample size, that was a monthly violation. And if you had E. coli, that was an acute violation. Now we had level 1 and level 2 assessments. But aside from that, I'll get back to those. When revised kicked in, it told all systems you need to reevaluate your bacteriological sample site plan. Are you meeting the population number? Are you considering groundwater? Are you considering source waters that are getting disinfected? Are you considering all these things when you're testing? I can tell you right now, they are for the city of San Diego. San Diego tests our reservoirs. We also test. I actually don't know if we have any groundwater sources, but if we did, we would have a sample site right there at the groundwater, so that we could test that as well. But yeah, when the revised kicked in, it told us to reevaluate these things so that we would be more representative of the sites. And we do. We have that very much. But also to have a routine and to have basically a procedure for when you have to do repeats. I feel like this rule was more for other systems because San Diego already had all this stuff in place. And so we do all these things, and so revised. Like, okay, so we're in revised now. So the triggers. So level 1 assessment. So what happens is, if you're over 5%, I'm going to have to find a way to explain this better because it sounds very jumbled, doesn't it? So if you go over 5, there's just so much in total coliform, revised total coliform rule to explain. If you go over 5%, if you're doing more than 40 samples a month on routines and repeats, then you have to do a level 1 assessment. If you're over 1 sample positive, if you're taking less than 40 samples a month, then you do a level 1 assessment. And also, if you get a total coliform positive, and then you don't do all 3 repeats, that's also a level 1 assessment. A level 1 assessment is looking in your system for the cause of the total coliforms and replacing it or fixing it, whatever you need to do to fix the situation. And then, of course, you're testing again after that happens. You have to do that within 30 days. You have to do all the fixing within 30 days, and then submit to the state within 30 days. You have to do that within 30 days and submit to the state. Then there's level 2 assessments. Level 2s are triggered by 3 things. The simpler ones to know are, if you get 2 level 1s in 12 months, that's 1 trigger. If you get 2 level 1s in 2 consecutive years, that's a trigger as well. And the last one is if you get the MCL violation of E. coli. And I'll explain that in a minute. But what a level 2 assessment is, it is the state or a state, not accepted, but an entity that the state approves of, they'll do it instead of us doing it. Where we reported on ourselves, it wasn't good enough. Now they're going to do the reporting on us. And we have to make sure it gets done. It's up to us to make sure it gets done, even though it's on them to do it. And that has to be done within 30 days again, and then submitted to the state within 30 days. It has to be found and fixed and reported to the state within 30 days. Because it's E. coli or total coliforms. You got to take care of that immediately. If you don't do a level 1 or level 2 assessment, that is a violation, and then that needs to be reported. And if you don't do a... If you don't do a level 1 or... If you don't conduct a level 1 or level 2, that's a violation. If you don't submit within 30 days, that's also a violation. And then lastly is I didn't tell you the MCLs. So there are 5 ways to get an MCL in E. coli. And those 5 are... If you get so when you do a sample, if it comes back as a total coliform, it must be tested for E. coli. And if it's positive for E. coli, and you do a repeat, and that's also positive for E. coli, that's 1. If you get a positive E. coli on the repeat, on the routine, and a positive total coliform on the repeat, that's 2. No, if you get positive and then don't test for E. coli, that's 2. Yeah, that's 2. If you get a positive E. coli and a positive... I have to double check that one. Oof, there's 5 of them though. So there's routine samples and repeat samples. 3 of them are if the routine sample has E. coli in it, and if the repeat has E. coli, that's 1. If the repeat has total coliform but is not tested for E. coli, that's 2. And there's a 3rd repeat where it can only be... It's got to be just positive total coliform. Just anyway, that's 1 as well. Then, if you get a positive total coliform, and then you do a repeat total coliform, and that doesn't get tested for E. coli, that's another 1. And then if you do a positive coliform, and the repeat is a positive E. coli, that's the 5th one. So I jumbled something in there, but those are the 5 ways. And so basically, the entire point of that rule is, if there's E. coli, if there's total coliforms in the water, fix it. If there's E. coli in the water, tell the public immediately and fix it. Because those are tier 1s. Also when things aren't getting tested, you assume for the worst and go with that. That's what's important there. So that is everything. I think surface water treatment rule, disinfection byproduct rule, those are solidly perfect. I'm good on those. I just need to remember one of the which one else does running annual average on disinfection byproduct. For groundwater, there's a little bit more I need to understand. For lead and copper, I understand that very well. For public notification, I understand it very well. Total coliform, what I need to work on is formatting that one. What is the order I need to explain it in? Because it's a big one, and once I have it, I'm done. And that's all the regs. Then there's situationals, and I didn't even talk about those, but I talked about those at the start with chemicals. Other situations are, what if your employee is drunk? What if your employee is missing? What if your employee had a heart attack? What if a car crashes into the source water? What if a car crashes into your plant? What if terrorism happens? What do you do if terrorism happens? Those can be questions. Also, what if Flint, Michigan happens? Here's the thing, let me tell you right now. My job with a T5 is this. This is what should happen with Flint. When they told them they needed to change water sources to this other source, that was the guy's job at the top to say, I'm calling the state. If you're gonna do this, we're not gonna be able to handle it. The water's gonna be dangerous. It's gonna hurt a lot of people. I'm gonna call the state. If you don't change your mind, I'm calling the state and I'm resigning because the blood's not gonna be on my hands. That is your job. Your job is to tell them no. Your job is to tell Politicians, the people above you, whatever. No, because you are the line of defense for the public. And whoever was at the top there failed the public. And that's why his head should roll with everyone else. Everyone below him, maybe not. But him, the 5, the head of the plant, his head should have rolled. No one went to jail as far as I know at this point. No one went to jail. Plenty of money was given out, but no one went to jail as far as I know. I have to double check on that now. But that's my job, is to protect you guys. Is to go, no. I will do whatever I can with what we got to do what needs to be done and to work with you guys. But if we cannot possibly protect the public with what you want to do, you politicians want to do, or whatever higher-ups want to do, it's not happening. And if you want to do it anyway, then you're going to have to remove me, and I'm whistleblowing to the state. And I'm whistleblowing to federal. I'm whistleblowing to everyone. Because this is the health of thousands in jeopardy here. And that's what happened to Flint. Thousands were affected by this. The futures of many were affected by this. And that is the job I'm going for. The man who holds the line on that. Now, San Diego is amazing. I'm not just saying this because it's where I work, but we do a very good job. We protect the public very well, and I trust the men at the top. And that's why I want to be one of those guys. Because I trust them, I want to be someone that can be trusted in the future. So that's the vlog. You learned a lot about American water regulations. And there's a little bit I'm shaky on, but I'm at 90%. So I I have 9 more days to polish up. 11 more days to polish up. So that's it. There's the vlog. I had fun up here from watching and listening. And that's what's all about, isn't it? Having fun, things come by, and see you next time. Ooh, I'm going to listen to this after Jinx edits it and everything, so I can see where I messed up and what I can explain better. And that was 50 minutes, while the interview's only 30. So obviously they're not going to ask me all those rules, but I got to be ready in case any of those rules happen. Thanks for coming by. See you later.